Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out. My name is Amanda, and if you had told me 5 years ago that I would one day be sitting alone in a quiet house, penning the story of how everything in my life unraveled, I would have laughed at you. Back then, I thought I had everything a woman could ask for. A beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, a stable marriage, 2 healthy children, and a husband who provided for us. On the surface, we were the image of suburban happiness. But underneath it all, there were cracks. Little ones at first, ignored, glossed over, excused. Until one day, those cracks split wide open and swallowed me whole. My husband, Charles, is a man of order. Everything has its place, every plan has a schedule, and emotions are something to be managed rather than expressed. He's not cruel. He never raised a hand, never shouted. But over the years, he stopped looking at me like I was someone he loved. I became a fixture in the house. A mother, a cook, a housekeeper. I don't blame him entirely. Life got busy. We both focused so hard on being responsible adults that we forgot how to be people together. And when you're not seen, when you're not heard, something inside you starts to wither. You begin to crave connection in the most unexpected places. The neighbor boy, Ethan, had lived next door since he was a child. His parents, Lisa and Greg, were always polite but distant. The sort who waved from across the lawn but rarely invited anyone inside. Ethan, though, was different. From the moment he could walk, he was curious, friendly, always lingering around our yard, asking questions about everything. I remember him being a shy teenager, tall and lanky, with a skateboard tucked under his arm and headphones dangling from his ears. Over the years, he grew into a handsome young man. Quiet, respectful, and kind. He was the type who offered to help carry groceries or mow the lawn if he saw you struggling. I always thought of him as the sweet kid next door. Never as anything else. Until last summer. It started innocently, as these things always do. Charles had taken a new consulting contract in another state, which meant he'd be traveling 3 to 4 days a week. The kids were away at a summer camp. I suddenly found myself with long, empty days. The silence in the house was deafening. I took up gardening to distract myself, to keep my hands busy. That's when Ethan started coming around more often. At first, it was just small talk. He'd be returning from a jog or on his way out, and we'd exchange pleasantries. Then, one afternoon, he stopped to ask about the flowers I was planting. I remember how genuine his interest was. He crouched beside me, running his fingers through the soil, listening as I talked about how I planned to arrange the beds. It felt nice being asked about something, being listened to. Over the next few weeks, his visits became more frequent. Sometimes he'd bring over lemonade or cold water. Once, he helped me move a heavy bag of soil, and we ended up sitting on the porch for an hour, chatting about everything and nothing. He had just finished his 2nd year of college and was staying with his parents for the summer. He talked about his dreams, his doubts, his plans. And I listened, not as a neighbor or a family friend, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to be 20 and full of questions. He made me feel alive. Not young, exactly, but relevant, like I was part of something again. I tried to ignore the change in my feelings. I kept telling myself it was a phase, a harmless friendship. But there were moments, brief, fleeting, where his gaze lingered a little too long or his words held a warmth that went beyond politeness. One evening, after we spent nearly 2 hours talking on the porch, he looked at me and said, "You're the only person I feel I can really talk to." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I hadn't felt that seen or valued in years. And then the guilt set in. What was I doing? I was a married woman twice his age. He was the neighbor's son. I tried to pull away. I told him I was busy, that I needed to focus on family. For a week, I avoided him, hoping the distance would help reset my emotions. But one afternoon, I was out in the garden again, lost in thought, when I heard a quiet voice behind me. "I've missed talking to you." I turned around and there he was, holding a small tray of seedlings. He had this uncertain smile, as if he wasn't sure if he was welcome. I should have told him to go. I should have drawn a line right there. But instead, I found myself smiling back. "I've missed it too," I said. That moment was the turning point. We didn't cross any boundaries. Not yet. But the emotional connection deepened. We talked nearly every day. Sometimes he'd come by late in the evening, and we'd sit on the back porch in silence, just watching the stars. He confided in me about his parents' strained marriage, about how he often felt invisible in his own home. I understood that feeling too well. I told him about my dreams before I became a wife and a mother, the parts of myself I had buried over the years. I didn't realize how far I had drifted from who I used to be until I saw that version of myself reflected in his eyes. One rainy afternoon, everything came to a head. I had just come in from the garden, soaked and laughing, when I saw him standing on the porch with a towel in hand. He had seen me struggling and came over without a word. I took the towel, our fingers brushed, and we both froze. The air between us changed. It wasn't a grand moment. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. "I think about you a lot," he said softly. I looked at him, my heart pounding. My mind screamed at me to stop this, to push him away. But I didn't. I couldn't. I wanted so badly to feel something again, something real. "I think about you too," I whispered. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. But that moment sealed something between us. After that, there was no pretending we were just neighbors. We both knew something had shifted. The guilt became overwhelming. Every time Charles called, every time he came home and kissed me on the cheek, I felt like a fraud. But at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to end my conversations with Ethan. I justified it as emotional support, as companionship, as something harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was real. And it was dangerous. One afternoon, as I was sorting laundry, Charles came home early from his trip. He surprised me. Said he had missed us and wanted to spend time together. He brought flowers, something he hadn't done in years. We sat down to dinner and he asked questions about my week. Really listened for the first time in ages. And that's when I realized how far I had strayed. The look in his eyes was warm, hopeful. He was trying. And here I was, half in love with the boy next door. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. I thought about everything. My marriage, my children, Ethan, and the kind of woman I wanted to be. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know if I had the strength to do it. What started as a quiet companionship had grown into something that threatened to tear apart the life I had built. I wasn't a villain, but I wasn't blameless either. I was a woman who had lost herself. And in trying to feel whole again, I had crossed lines I never thought I would. And this was only the beginning. After that night with Charles, I knew I had reached a crossroads. For the first time in what felt like years, he was present, really present. He stayed home that weekend, cooked dinner with me, watched old movies with the kids. He even asked if I wanted to plan a trip together, just the two of us, once summer was over. Something had shifted in him. Maybe he sensed my distance. Maybe he had simply realized how far apart we'd grown. Whatever the reason, he was trying. And I should have felt joy. I should have leaned into it with open arms. But instead, I felt guilt. Deep, gnawing guilt. I avoided Ethan for the next few days. I kept the curtains drawn, stayed indoors more than usual, and muted my phone. My heart ached when I passed by the porch swing where we used to talk. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that I needed to end the emotional tie and focus on my marriage. Charles was my husband. He was the father of my children. I owed it to our family to fight for us. But avoidance wasn't closure. It was delay. One afternoon, I was out in the backyard trimming the lavender when I saw Ethan standing at the edge of our property near the fence. His hands were in his pockets. His head tilted slightly like he was trying to decide whether to speak. I tried not to look. I didn't want to give him any signal of encouragement. But as I turned back toward the house, I heard his voice. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line." I stopped in my tracks. He didn't move closer, didn't try to pressure me. He just stood there, his voice calm, but full of something I couldn't name. Vulnerability, maybe. Or heartbreak. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you. I care about you. That's all." I turned to face him then. I don't know what he saw in my expression, but his face softened like he understood the storm inside me. And then, without another word, he walked away. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not just because of Ethan, but because I felt like I was living in two worlds. One was the life I had built with Charles. Stable. Respectable. Expected. The other was this growing bond with someone who made me feel seen, who reminded me of who I once was. I wasn't ready to destroy my family, but I couldn't lie to myself either. A week passed. Then two. I focused on my kids, my home, my routines. Charles remained attentive, and I tried to meet him halfway. We had dinner together every night, talked about the kids' school projects, even made plans to renovate the upstairs bathroom. From the outside, everything looked like it was on the mend. But I missed Ethan. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found one of the small notebooks I used to carry in the garden. I had scribbled thoughts in it during those quiet afternoons. Pages filled with memories of conversations, flower types, and notes about things Ethan had said. I don't know why, but reading them brought everything back in a rush. I missed his questions, his curiosity, the way he made even the simplest moment feel meaningful. The next morning, I told myself I would walk past his house. Just a walk. Nothing more. It was silly, but I felt drawn to the space we used to share. As I approached, I saw him on the porch, headphones around his neck, sketching in a notebook. He didn't notice me right away. His brow was furrowed, his hand moving quickly. I stood there for a second too long. He looked up. Our eyes met. I should have walked away, but instead I offered a small, hesitant wave. He returned it. A few minutes later, I heard a knock at my back door. My heart jumped. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there, holding a small container. "My mom made extra lemon bars," he said. "Thought you might want some." His voice was careful, gentle. I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't talk about what had happened. We sat at the kitchen table, eating lemon bars and talking about everything else. Music, books, how his summer classes were going. It felt easy again, familiar. But I kept my distance, emotionally. I didn't let myself linger in the past. I reminded myself that this had to be the last time, and it might have been, if not for what happened a few days later. Charles had a sudden emergency trip. His team needed him to fly out that evening and handle a client issue. He apologized as he packed, kissed me goodbye, and promised to be back by Saturday. I felt the silence return the moment he left. The house grew still again, just like before. That night, a storm rolled in. Loud thunder, sheets of rain against the windows. I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, curled up on the couch, tried to read. Then just past midnight, the power went out. The sudden darkness made the house feel unfamiliar. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, then went to check on the breaker. As I stepped outside onto the porch, I saw a faint light next door. A flashlight beam danced across Ethan's garage. I called out to him, just to say hello, maybe for reassurance. He turned, saw me, and jogged over. "You okay?" he asked. "The storm's crazy." "Power's out," I said. "I was just checking the fuse box." "I've got candles if you need any," he offered. He followed me inside, placing a few tea light candles on the kitchen counter. Their glow softened the room, made everything feel warmer. We stood in the quiet for a moment, the wind howling outside. "You ever feel like life throws you into places you never expected to be?" he asked. "All the time," I whispered. We talked again, this time deeper. He told me he had been trying to move on, that he was applying for internships in another city, that he needed space. I told him I understood, but the sadness between us was undeniable. Then he looked at me and said something that has haunted me since. "I never meant to fall for you, but I did." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I knew then that I had broken something in both of us. What started as kindness and connection had turned into something painful and confusing. I wasn't proud of what I had allowed to grow. I didn't blame him. He was young, searching, and I was older, vulnerable, pretending that emotions could be contained like neatly labeled boxes. I asked him to leave, not angrily, not coldly, just softly, with finality. "This can't be what defines either of us," I said. He nodded, his eyes glossy with unshed tears. "Goodbye, Amanda." And then he was gone. The next few days were the hardest. I told Charles the first wasn't feeling well and kept to myself. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't live in emotional limbo any longer. I had to either recommit to my marriage completely or be honest about the truth I had buried for too long, that something in me had changed, and I couldn't go back to pretending. I chose to talk. Not about Ethan, not fully, but about everything else, about feeling invisible, about how much space had grown between us. I told Charles that I needed more than shared bills and routines. I needed to be seen again, to feel like we were in this together, not just surviving side by side. He listened. To his credit, he really listened. He didn't explode. He didn't shut down. He simply asked, "Can we fix it?" And I said, "I want to try." In the months that followed, we went to counseling. We took slow steps to rebuild what had frayed. We found laughter again, even if it was tentative. I didn't forget Ethan. I couldn't. He was a part of a chapter one hadn't expected, one that left a mark. But I chose my family. And now, looking back, I know that what happened with Ethan wasn't about romance or scandal. It was about loneliness, about two people who saw something in each other during a time when they both felt lost. I will carry that with me always. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Months have passed since that summer, and while some memories still carry weight, they no longer define me. Charles and I continued our slow rebuild. There were days when it felt natural and easy, and others when silence sat between us, like a reminder of all we had to repair. But we kept going. We chose each other, even when it was hard. I haven't seen Ethan in a long while. His family mentioned that he got an internship out of state and planned to finish his degree there. I never reached out. I didn't need to. Some goodbyes are best left untouched, especially when they come from a place of care and quiet respect. There are still moments when I remember his words, his eyes when he said goodbye. But now, it's not with longing or guilt. It's with understanding. He came into my life during a time of uncertainty and filled a space I didn't realize was so empty. For that, I'm grateful. I don't excuse what happened, but I've forgiven myself. I've learned that even in our lowest, most confusing moments, we can grow. We can face ourselves and come out stronger on the other side. Life isn't perfect now, but it's real. And I am present in it. I listen more. I speak honestly. I found a part of myself again, one that values connection, vulnerability, and truth. This was a chapter of my life I never expected, one I'll never forget. And while it challenged everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and self-worth, it also reminded me that we are all capable of change and of starting over, no matter how far off course we've wandered.